Hello and welcome. Welcome everybody to Everything is Energy. Welcome to the conjunction between Uranus and Sedna. This is a conjunction that's been operational for a couple months of time. It's going to be a conjunction that's operational for a little bit after this day, but it is exact on Sunday, May 24th, 2026. And boy, the themes are pretty on point. You know, I guess I'll just say this is one of the more unusual and mythic and potentially transformative moments of this era. And I don't say that lightly because I feel like the transit of Pluto into Aquarius and, Neptune into Gemini, I mean, Uranus into Gemini and Neptune into Aries, excuse me, those are all unheard of for thousands and thousands of years. So I'm not saying this lightly, but I'm saying and to have Uranus conjunct Sedna. I'll get to why Sedna is so particularly curious to have her be exactly conjunct Uranus. But I just want to begin by saying that this is not a small transit. And when we think about Uranus being the lightning bolt planet of awakening, innovation, Uranus also governs electricity and liberation and higher intelligence and sudden change. And almost, the future arriving before we may even feel cognitively ready for it. I like to say that Uranus reminds us that we are the high technology that we seek, that we are the creators of our reality. I'll get to that in a little bit. But I want to just touch on Sedna. If we think about all the outer planets as being subtle energy and they have these orbits of several hundred years time and they spend 20 to 80 years in a sign, Sedna is even way farther out than the outer planets. She's not part of the traditional planetary framework. She really comes from the edges of our solar system. And it's, if we think about it, it's kind of a region that's so distant that her orbit is measured in thousands of years. Thousands versus hundreds. So to have her conjunct Uranus is way, way, way more than a once in a lifetime experience. So, because of her huge orbit, I really want to offer that Sedna brings us into the experience of deep time. And if subtle energy lifts us up and out of linear time and space, that doesn't mean that time and space go away, but I want to offer this notion of deep time. And, she also brings us into the deep time. It's also ancestral time, mythic time, the kind of time where trauma and survival and fertility and death and rebirth and collective memory, those are all big themes. They all live together. And now, Uranus, the great awakener, the lightning bolt of change, reminding us that we are the change, is meeting Sedna in Gemini. Gemini, the sign of the twins, Gemini, the sign of language and thought and communication and information and media. I think of Gemini as not just the twins as the glyph shows, looking away from each other as if they have two polarized perspectives, but almost like Gemini, the person at the party who doesn't want to sit with all their friends on the couch and talk about the same old stuff in the corner, the person at the party that wants to talk to the whole room is curious because everybody's story matters. So, and also, Uranus governs the nervous system. I'll say that. But this conjunction with Uranus and Sedna is not only asking what is changing for us internally and externally, but it's asking, and this is key. This is it. What is the story that we're telling about the change? This is where we get our power back. This is why Uranus is here. What's our story right now, today? And this is rich, right? Because the story matters, because our vibration matters. And also Sedna's story matters. And I want to get to the story and I want to offer some, takes on it. So it's an Inuit myth. And in Inuit mythology, Sedna is often described as a young girl who's betrayed by her father. And there's a couple different versions of the myth, but in most all the versions, she's taken out as a girl by her father into the sea, and he throws her overboard to kill her. And the myth is different, but she tries to climb back in. He cuts off her fingers. She tries to climb back up again. Please wait. No, he cuts off her hands. Tries again, cuts off her forearms. The myth goes on. She sinks to the bottom of the ocean. And as she falls to the bottom of the ocean, and those parts remain there from her severed body, from what has been taken from her, all the creatures of the sea are born. She is a goddess of fertility and abundance and birth of all life in the sea. The seals, the walruses, the whales, all the beings of the deep. And this isn't just profound for us, but if we put ourselves in the lives and the livelihoods of the Inuit people who lived on ice, whose entire food systems, most all their resources came from the sea. So she's not just a fertility goddess, she's goddess of the sea. She's mother of the sea animals. She's a goddess of sustenance and abundance. So, this isn't just ornamental. This is about very root chakra type things, right? Life, food, warmth, survival. That's what Sedna provided to those people. And I really want to say at the top of this podcast, Sedna is not just a story of trauma. I mean, look at the end of the story. It's a story of transformation. And we live in transformational times. And well, she very much is a story of an innocent girl who was betrayed and harmed and dismembered and sent into the depths. But the point is, the story doesn't end there. And this is where I want to offer a reframing. Because we can, yes, absolutely say that Sedna's myth is a story of patriarchy harming an innocent girl. And that is absolutely true. We can read it as a story of betrayal by her father. That is the story. We can read it as a story of what happens when feminine life and innocence and fertility and trust are sacrificed in order to preserve control and fear and an old structure at any cost. And that reading is true. And on one hand, we are still living inside that story. We can see it in our politics. We can see it in our institutions. We can see it in the way that, in some sense, girls and women are still disbelieved and silenced and exploited, and even made responsible for the chaos around them. But if that was the only message of Sedna's myth, the myth would stop at the ocean floor. It would stop at, there's divine masculine and divine feminine. There's misused masculine and there's misused feminine. So I want to be very clear. This isn't an anti-man podcast. We're all each divine masculine and divine feminine. And ideally, we are the embodiment and the balance and the harnessing of both in its divinity. So what happens when one gets out of balance? Well, it's in all of us, also regardless of our gender. But also those of us who are of that gender are uniquely suited to have a 3D experience about those themes. But that's not where the myth ends, right? She becomes this source of abundance. She becomes the one who feeds and sustains the people. She becomes the keeper of the animals. She's not a wounded girl. She's a sovereign goddess of the deep ocean. And I would like to offer, and this is my interpretation, take it or leave it. It's a free world. It's just my sense of what's happening right now. This is the invitation of Uranus conjunct Sedna. Uranus says, wake up, awaken. And Sedna says, remember what was born from the wound. Uranus says, break the pattern. And Sedna says, do not reduce me to what happened to me. It reminds me of Abraham Hicks. Abraham Hicks likes to remind us that the universe does not hear the word no. The universe doesn't hear the word no. So it doesn't mean that we can't talk about what's going on in our world. It means that, Uranus is reminding us that everything we talk about carries weight and measure. So together, Uranus and Sedna say that transformation is not only survival, transformation is creation. We are in a creation moment, individually and collectively, and Uranus conjunct Sedna is activating and reminding us of that. And it's interesting because, as you guys know, I do the weekly astrology forecast, and it was right on point that Uranus got super active. As I'm recording this a little bit before Sunday. Uranus has been super active this week leading up to this conjunction. And I'll just highlight a couple of the things. On May 17th, Mercury was conjunct Uranus in Gemini. And that was this like flash of insight, right? That was nervous system awakening. That was a sudden message, a new thought pattern. And then on May 22nd, the Sun conjoined Uranus. There was a couple other things, but those two things, there were two conjunctions before this conjunction. Mind you, they were with more quickly moving objects. But Sun conjoining Uranus 2 days before this particular conjunction is helping this message to break through into 3D. Because the Sun conjoining Uranus is an illumination. It's a light of consciousness meeting the planet of awakening. So, on the 22nd, potentially, or thereabouts, something is revealed. And also something becomes impossible to unknow or to unsee. So by the time Uranus meets Sedna on exactly May 24th, we've already been primed. Mercury's touched Uranus, awakening our mind. Sun has touched Uranus, awakening our consciousness. And then Uranus is conjoining Sedna, which is awakening the myth beneath the mind. And so this isn't simply about thinking differently. That's old news. And we kind of all know how that does and doesn't stick. We can't force, if it is a free universe as it is, and it's a sovereign universe and every individual is sovereign, it is not about everybody getting on the same page. It's about everybody coming into their own alignment. So it's not about thinking differently. It's about remembering differently, and it's about telling the story differently. Telling the story consciously, telling the story creatively. I mean, creatively in a conscious co-creation with the future. And this matters because we're already in, as I mentioned, a time of enormous outer planet change. Pluto in Aquarius, Neptune in Aries, Uranus in Gemini. These are not small shifts. They are generational changes. I'll just say that again. And if we kind of really lightly remind ourselves that Pluto in Aquarius is transforming communities, it's transforming top-down structures of Capricorn that it just left into circular structures, into social systems that are networked on the same playing field. And Neptune in Aries is dissolving and reimagining our identity and our courage and our spiritual will and our initiation. And Uranus in Gemini is electrifying our language, our media, our technology, also our transportation, our education. And it's reminding us of just what we're talking about, that we are the change. We are the high technology that we seek. And then here comes Sedna. All that was already like, boom, boom. Any one of those three would keep astrologers talking for a whole year or several. I mean, these are 10 to 80-year transits, them shifting signs. But this conjunction has been operational, as I mentioned, for a couple months. It's going to be operational for a couple months. It's exact on the 24th. And astrology is cuspy, as I like to remind us that, something may happen exactly on May 24th. It's just like fireworks, but also maybe the theme's already afoot, right? And maybe the theme will be realized a little bit after. It's not necessarily needing to be on that day, but they're around about. So, Sedna is reminding us that we need to build the future with the body. We need to build our future with the earth. We need to build our future with the feminine. And we need to build our future from an ancestral level, personally and collectively, remembering what has been sacrificed within ourselves, within our communities. And this is why I think Uranus conjunct Sedna is so important in relationship to technology and AI too. Because Uranus in Gemini is absolutely about accelerated communication. It's about new languages, it's about new networks, it's about new systems of intelligence. And in on one hand, it's new ways of connecting, mind to machine, person to person, culture to culture. But here we have Sedna that just simply asks, who pays that price? Who is thrown overboard in the name of progress? Whose body becomes foundation for someone else's survival or someone else's benefit or someone else's profiteering? Whose labor, whose innocence, whose memory, whose grief, whose ancestral knowledge, whose ecological world is sacrificed so the future can call itself innovative? And I am not saying that I'm anti-AI at all. I'm saying that this is a collective shift and it's a mental shift. Because Sedna doesn't say reject the future. Just like what I'm saying, it's not that AI it's Sedna says co-create it. And this is where the myth I am offering today becomes quite radical. She does not remain only a victim. She becomes a source. A source of what? A source of energy, a field of abundance. And in the myth, she becomes this field of this. If you think about the goddess of the depths of the ocean, this deep oceanic intelligence that people must remain in right relationship. Everything must remain. Everything is energy. And if everything is energy, then there is no hiding anything. There is us seeking right relation with everything in our world. And this is where Uranus, I imagine, and, speaking, is it brings the lightning bolt. It reminds us that we're not waiting for technology to save us. We're not mindlessly running around after technology, propping it up because we have to get to some thing. We are the technology, the human body, the human consciousness, the human nervous system is a technology. Also, Uranus reminds us that language is technology, ritual is technology, myth is technology, memory is technology, community. Community. Have you ever come together in a circle? I love doing my online circles. We meet on Zoom every new moon and full moon for the Lunar Herbal Alchemy Circle. And boy, are those circles palpably energetically different than when I was sitting out here as I am in nature alone. Community is technology because energetically, 1+1 in terms of people, they met it exponentiates itself. And the other part of technology, if we're thinking about ourselves as technology, we are the creator. So our ability to transform and transmute heavy energy. That story is full of heavy energy. You could call it pain and trauma. Our ability to transform that heavy energy into nourishment is technology. That comes from our heart and it comes from our consciousness. And our ability to tell a more empowering story, that is technology too. Storytelling has been an important part of humans' existence ever since we've been around. So I just kind of want to put a pin in we have a choice of what cultural script we're reading from and what cultural script we're speaking about. So there is an innocent girl that was harmed. There's a feminine body that was sacrificed. There was an earth body that was exploited. And then everyone stands around naming the wound, but no one creates the world. And so that ability to create, that is our technology. And Uranus and Sedna really invite us to become more energetically intelligent around the wound. And that is not by denying it. That is not by putting it under a rug and shoving it into a corner and saying we don't want to talk about it. It's not by spiritual bypassing it, by just saying, woo, yay, hey. It's not by pretending that, I'm going to use the P word, patriarchy is not real, or that violence is not real, or that trauma is not real, but it's really, and I think it's viscerally operational for all of us now. The story doesn't end there. That's not where we put the period and the end of the sentence. Because Sedna's myth does not end in violence. It ends with relationship. It ends with people needing to approach her with respect. It ends in her being the goddess of the deep sea and the goddess of abundance and the goddess of life. And it ends with the deep sea animals being released when right relationship is restored. So we're living in very powerful times. And if we really can take a step back, a few steps back, and I'm not saying that everything that happened, I don't want to bypass the trauma of what's happening in the world today or any day. But what if we look back in 50 years and we realize that all of the actors are acting their parts? And however traumatic they might be, whatever trauma buttons people might be pushing, whatever sadness and loss and death and unnecessary violence is unfolding, maybe it's part of a larger story. I'm not saying it makes it okay, but I'm saying that, you know, if we have to keep going. We have to keep telling the story. Because if Sedna's myth ends with, oh, poor girl, dead in the ocean, what's the story, right? So the other thing is, part of Sedna's story is abundance doesn't come from domination. Abundance comes from reverence. And that is such a powerful message for our time. If we think about the sacredness of the natural world is one of the first entryways into that. That's something that hopefully all humans can agree because we live in this natural world. But we're in a cultural moment that some of our conversations are quite exhausting. They're highly charged. They're also part of the process. The harms are real, the pain is real. And Sedna's myth is so precise here because the violence is sequential. It's not one event. And I'm going to use a phrase here that may or may not resonate, but the idea of death by 1,000 cuts. First the fingers, then the hands, then the arms. Metaphorically, this kind of speaks to the way that innocence or something is not destroyed all at once. It's compromise by compromise, dismissal by dismissal, silence by silence. And yet each severed piece becomes life. So this isn't to glorify suffering. This isn't to say, cut me up more. And this is not to say that we need trauma and trauma is necessary. It's to remind us that life has this magical capacity, that there is never energy lost. If everything is energy, then life reorganizes itself. The universe abhors a vacuum. Have you ever noticed that whenever something leaves, if it's a job or a person or a theme, there's a space, something else kind of starts to come in there. So, in terms of this myth and what it means for us right now, something can fall to the bottom of the ocean and be treated in an irreverent manner. And it can become more powerful than the world that tried to destroy it. That's Sedna's medicine. And Uranus is electrifying that right now. So Uranus is saying, as it's in this conjunction, it's kind of just reminding us this isn't just an ancient myth, it's happening now. So, where are we being thrown overboard by old systems? Where are we still clinging to the boat that harmed us? Where are we trying to climb back into a structure that has already shown us it can't hold us safely? And what would happen if we stopped trying to get back into the old boat? What would happen if we let the descent become the initiation? And what would happen if we, by nature of our experience, by nature of breathing and living right now, if we became the deep? So this isn't easy work. And this is certainly not my lightest podcast. And everything I offer, take it or leave it. If it resonates, keep listening. If it doesn't, that's okay. But Sedna she's not light mythology, but she's profoundly generative and profoundly transformative. And she reminds us that the ocean floor isn't a place of burial, it's a place of creation. It's a womb. And in many ways, it's a mystery. A mystery where new life forms emerge. And as I alluded to earlier, with Uranus and Gemini, this becomes an invitation to change the conversation. Because I forget the quote, but you know, um, I think you'll get it. We can't keep telling the same stories the same way and expect a different future. We are the change. We need new ways of speaking about things, new metaphors. We also need just new networks and new ways of communicating and co-creating. And also, stories that speak to the truth about harm, but also remember and honor the power that comes from that, not invoking it as the only way to that, but as in the same process that we revere the loss of a loved one from the physical world and we know that they are not gone and we can feel them more powerful than ever when they're out of their bodies. So if we stop making the death the final image and we embrace our loved one from across the veil, the story shifts, right? And if we have an experience of our loved one, in a butterfly, in a bird, I'm getting a little bit off topic, but I feel like, the wounded girl is not the final image. And it may be the apex of the story, but it may not be. Because the apex of the story is her transformation into the goddess of fertility and abundance. She is the goddess beneath the sea. So, this conjunction may ask us both individually and collectively, where have I reduced myself to the wound? To maybe even simply talking about the harm. And you know, where have I just kind of mistaken this survival mode as my final form? I truly believe that humans are meant to be bright and healthy and happy and loving creatures 24/7. Whether or not I achieve that every day is another situation, but it is a download that I've received. And, you know, what to the same thing, if we need to kind of shift the frame and the reference and how we're telling the story and harness the power of storytelling. Where am I being called to become the source and not simply the survivor? Where am I the change? And also collectively, what are we birthing from the breakdown? What new communities, conversations, technologies, cultural forms are emerging from places that we didn't expect and we thought may have just simply been lost? How do we work with AI? How do we work with the media and communication and innovation without severing ourselves from the earth, from our body, from our ancestral and sacred roots? And really, you know, it's a deeper invitation to examine, how do we become the high technology that we seek? Because that is the sentence that I keep hearing. I mean, I say that sentence a lot, but we are the change. We are the technology. We are the intelligence. And we are the bridge between ancient myth and future civilization. And I would offer that Uranus conjunct Sedna in Gemini is a portal of awakened storytelling. And it invites and asks us to liberate the narrative. It invites and asks us to, instead of speaking from the boat, to speak from the depths. Pardon the barking dog. I'm going to stop for a second. So it asks us to remember that, the future is not only built by machines and platforms and networks and systems. The future is built by myth. The future is built by our consciousness. The future is built by the memory. And if you've ever done any work in energy healing or distance healing or Akashic records or working beyond time and space, you will know that the stories we tell ourselves are so important, and it is possible to shift them. And we have the power to shift the narrative. So what stories do we choose to repeat? What stories do we choose to interrupt? And what stories do we finally become brave enough to create? So as this conjunction is perfecting, I really want to invite you to sit with Sedna, not as a story of tragedy, but as power. And not as a betrayed daughter, but as a mother of abundance. And not as one who was cut apart, but one whose body became life. And not as a symbol of what, the forces in balance in the world have done, but a symbol of what can still become. And if I use the word patriarchy and it's too charged, I apologize. I know it's a loaded word. I just feel like it's kind of the most succinct. If we forget what patriarchy has done and we think about Sedna as a symbol of what feminine energy can become when it's no longer asking permission to live. That's the awakening. And that's not just a female thing. I mentioned we're all divine masculine and divine feminine. Ideally 50-50. That's the embodiment. And this is the myth beneath the technology. And this is the ocean beneath the information age. This is Sedna meeting Uranus. So this is Sedna's inviting us. This is our invitation to co-create from the deep. So let's go ahead and shift to meditation, because I said a lot and there's a lot of charge in what I said. I think it might be a nice time for just to us to kind of take a nice slow breath in through the nose and gently exhale through the mouth. Again, breathing in through your nose and breathing out through your mouth. And just simply let your body start to soften. And if you notice any areas where you might be holding tension or energy, you can invite those areas to relax and release. And see if you can simply allow yourself to fully arrive in this moment exactly as you are. There's no performance here, there's no fixing, there's no urgency, there's no trying, there's just now, this moment, just this breath and just this body. And now I invite you to imagine that you're standing on the edge of just this vast northern sea. And the air is cold and clear, and the sky is huge. It's immense. And before you stretches this ancient ocean, dark and alive and primordial. And beneath the surface of this ancient ocean lies memory that's older than language, memory that's older than civilization, and memory that's older than the stories we've been told about who we're supposed to be. And as you stand at the edge of this sea, notice that you are not separate from it, that your body is made of water, that your emotions move like tides, and that your nervous system pulses with electricity. So you are both the ocean as well as the lightning. You are both Sedna and Uranus. You're both the depth and the awakening. And go ahead and take another slow breath in through your nose. And as you exhale, if you feel comfortable, imagine yourself just gently descending beneath the surface of the water. There is no fear here. You're able to breathe. And just see if you can allow yourself to surrender to the depth. Let your body relax, and the deeper you go, the quieter everything becomes. The noise and the static of the world is fading. The expectations, the pressure, the old identities, the stories that no longer fit. And somewhere in these deep waters, you encounter the part of yourself that has survived. The part that has endured challenge, loss, disappointment, maybe even betrayal, maybe simply exhaustion. And I invite you to just continue floating and breathing. And instead of turning away from this part of yourself, simply witness it. Bring the presence of your consciousness to honor it. And now notice something else. that this part of yourself is not broken. It is transforming. And just as Sedna descended into the depths and became something vast, something life-giving, something ancient and powerful, that you too are changing form. And so, what if the descent was not punishment? What if it was initiation? What if the parts of our collective world and our individual world that feel like endings are also openings into a deeper intelligence? And now take another slow breath in through your nose. And as you exhale, imagine the ocean around you beginning to glow softly with light. Bioluminescent, electric, and alive. Again, breathing in. And as you breathe out, the water begins to glow and hum. And this is Uranus moving through the deep waters of Sedna, awakening what has been sleeping and illuminating what has been hidden. And helping us all to remember that transformation is natural, that these cycles are natural. Just like the lunar cycles, they're cycles of life, that death and rebirth are woven into the fabric of existence itself. And now I invite you to just silently ask yourself, what story am I ready to release? And just sit with that for a moment. What story maybe feels a little heavy? What story am I ready to let go of? And then ask yourself, what new story is trying to emerge through me? Notice what arises without forcing an answer. What new story is trying to emerge through me? Perhaps it's a feeling. Maybe you get an image or a memory or a word. Just, there's no right answer here. Just trust what comes. And now imagine, even as you're floating in the waters of the deep sea, there's these energetic roots of light that are extending from your body into the ocean floor beneath you. And with these energetic roots, you are connected to the earth, to ancestry. You're connected to the living intelligence of life itself. That you are not separate from nature. You are nature. And that you are not separate from change. You are change. And perhaps most importantly, at least collectively, that we are not only what happens to us, we are also what we create from it. And just feel those words settling into the body. You are not only what happened to you, you are also what you create from it. And now take another deep inhale in through your nose And imagine yourself just slowly beginning to rise back towards the surface of this sea. And exhale. And staying with the breath, slower, deeper breath in through the nose. As you rise, you're carrying wisdom with you. You're carrying depth with you. Carrying the memory that something within you absolutely knows how to regenerate. It knows how to evolve. It knows how to become new. And as you emerge back up into the open air, notice the sky above you now. It's wide and it's electric and it's changing. As if to show and remind us that the future is not fixed. And neither are you, neither are any of us. And go ahead and take one final deep breath in through your nose. And release that breath through your mouth. May this Uranus Sedna conjunction help you remember your depth. May it help us all to release narratives that no longer define us. And may it help us each to trust our capacity to co-create a different future. And may you remember that you are not powerless in this time of change. You are part of the awakening itself. You are the transformation itself. Have a blessed conjunction. Thank you all for being here. Bright blessings and so much love.